This is Monocle on Design, a show where we discuss everything from architecture and craft to furniture and fashion. I'm Nick Manise. On today's program, we reflect on the most recent Copenhagen Fashion Week and look at the design of book spines. Plus, we feature the next instalment of our summer series. All that coming up on Monocle on Design. We start today's program with a reflection on Copenhagen Fashion Week, which wrapped up on Sunday. The Danish capital was filled with fashion journalists, buyers and designers who were all in town for a preview of the Spring-Summer 2025 collections. To help us make sense of it, we'll join a conversation between Monocle's fashion director, Natalie Theodosi, and associate editor, Grace Charlton, who reported from the event.
Copenhagen is a city that offers so much in terms of design, and to host a fashion week is really convenient as well because it's so easy to get everywhere, either on a bike or by car. It was fun to see the sort of people who were there, how different it is to London Fashion Week, and the mood.
August is everyone's favorite time to Copenhagen Fashion Week because you can make time to swim in the river, you can walk around, everyone's in a good mood. Fashion weeks now have become a little bit of competition between cities as well. And like you say, a lot of people want to go to Copenhagen Fashion Week to see the fashion, but also a big part of the reason is to experience the city, especially a city as easygoing and beautiful as Copenhagen. Do you find that that's a big part of the draw?
100%. I think people were as excited for the cheese and bread and the buns that they serve at Atelier September and Apotheke 57.
I don't think it's an exaggeration at all. All the wine bars, all the nice dinners that you get to go to. What about the fashion though?
It's very commercial. I was sort of surprised. London has more of a scene that you once described to me as scrappy, but it's a little bit more creative, a little bit more out there, maybe even avant-garde. We've got these amazing schools like Central St. Martin's, whereas Copenhagen is so commercially minded, and maybe that's a reflection of the industry at the moment. It was sort of strange to see very wearable clothes go down the runway, like beautiful shirts and trench coats.
Especially when you contrast London to Copenhagen. London, most of the clothes that you see on the catwalk might not even go into production, while the Danes have their feet very firmly on the ground and they think a lot more practically. I think that sometimes that is very good, and it's why those companies are successful and they have kept going and continue to grow. But at the same time, and I liked what you wrote in your column in the Monocle Minute, that we do need a little bit of fantasy. Was that something that you felt was missing from the week?
A little bit. I mean, they have their new talent program as part of Copenhagen Fashion Week, which was good. And there are some brands that are coming up like Biro and La Bagatelle, which are a bit more maybe crafty and young. I think that's the other thing. A lot of these brands are getting older and therefore they've got more commercial pressure on them. Maybe that's the joy of being a young brand, is that you don't have that. Also, a lot of the bigger brands are now missing. Canny is not showing anymore. Stina Goya. You know better than me. This was my first Copenhagen Fashion Week, but you've seen it evolved. And what do you think of this?
It has left a gap. Canny was really the highlight of Copenhagen Fashion Week. It's what put Copenhagen, I think, on the map. There is some, like you said, Biro, Nicolas Skovgaard, brands that are young and filling in the gap. But at the same time, no one has really lived up to that buzz of Canny. You spoke to the girls behind Baum und Pferdgarten, which are one of the few more established, familiar Danish names that are still part of the week, and it's an important presence. So what did you think of the show? What did they tell you after the show?
It was so fun. I mean, it was like a riot. It was like a party, and they hosted the show in this old stadium in Österbro, and they had the floodlights and the big cameras. There was even a guy on a Segway that was filming the girls as they were walking down and relaying live onto a screen behind them. It was a huge production. Everyone was wooing and cheering. The collection itself was super fun. It was inspired by sportswear like the Olympics and Euros, but also the office wear of the 1980s, like the power dressing that you could see in 9 to 5 with Dolly Parton. And I spoke to Rikke Baumgarten and Helle Hester Haver, before the show, and they were a delight to speak to. They've been around since 1999, and they were telling me also about the evolution of Copenhagen Fashion Week since it first took place in 2006, and like how it's grown and how it's been good for their community.
Many months ago, we got the opportunity to show our collection at one of the old stadiums in Copenhagen. It was very clear for us that we should include some kind of very sporty elements or theme to the collection. I love sport. Helle, you love the uniform of the sport. So it's been quite clear for us that we should work around that theme somehow. And for us, it's also important that you have some kind of a contrast to that, so it's not only sports and it gets too boring in a way.
Sport is also a classic part of our DNA. And so it was a really good mix.
Now this is your typewriter dictaphone adding machine. I better get your locker for that hat.
And we are quite obsessed with this classic office look. When you look at a movie from the 80s, Wall Street in New York, these busy women and men, we thought that was a quite funny contrast to the sports theme.
I consider us a team, Tess. And as such, we have a uniform. Simple, elegant, impeccable. Dress shabbily, they notice the dress. Dress impeccably, they notice the woman. Coco Chanel.
Working Girl is a classic. We don't have this big shoulder. We don't work with that because we think it has been there for so long time, but we love that movie.
Well, welcome to the front lines.
And I think it was completely new when you saw in the 80s that the women on their way to work wear sneakers. We haven't seen that in Denmark or in Europe at all. And then you suddenly saw that all the women that are going to the office wear sneakers because it's much more comfortable. And then the jeans. It's also a funny clash with the little suit and sneakers. It's so much the 80s.
Come on, I bet you can't wait to see the Xerox room.
Something that we hang on to still, and which we have been working around from the beginning, is that Helle and I are actually quite different in our design language. We love many of the same things and directions, but as a person we are quite different. One of the strongest things about the brand is that we have been able to include both our expressions in our design, both in one design but also when it comes to styling.
In the beginning it was maybe more playful, colorful, more printed, more crazy in a way. But at that time it was really something new in design world, in Denmark especially, or in Scandinavia. It was much more colorful. It was very bohemian at that time when we started. We were totally opposite. So I think it was a very good beginning for us, that people like it and they like it to see something new. If we talk about the next generation, I think it's fantastic what they are doing. You can see that it's really playful, but it's also really serious, and they really have all this element of responsibility.
The new generation have a much more international perspective to their collections.
That's right.
When we started, other brands started, it was very clear that it was Scandinavian brands, right? I think that the new generation looks much more international focus. It's not just around Denmark or Scandinavia. The development of Copenhagen Fashion Week, so much has happened to the city and the spirit here, because at that time it was a small town, difficult to get all the buyers to Copenhagen. Helle and I had to go to all the big capitals to get attention to the main buyers and so on. But today they come to Copenhagen to watch all the new brands, but also the older brands. If we only talk about Copenhagen as a city, it has developed incredible. We are actually able to attract so many journalists, influencers, buyers. The food scene and the architectural perspective is incredible. Usually we had to travel to get inspiration, and today you can actually also get the inspiration in the city as well. But there's so many talented young designers, which also helps. It's an incredible development we see.
That was Rikke Baumgarten, and before that, Helle Hesterhaver.
You also spoke to Sophie Dova, who's the director at the Copenhagen International Fashion Fairs, or CIF as it's known among attendees. I think it's important to note that, of course, there's all these amazing shows, what you see online, but CIF is a big trade fair and a big powerhouse, which makes Copenhagen Fashion Week so successful and well attended because a lot of the buyers go there to actually place orders. What did Sophie have to say about this season in particular? The brand mix that you find at CIF?
It was interesting to see the sort of, again, the commercial savviness that is the foundation of Copenhagen Fashion Week and the city's success. I went to the Bella Center where CIF takes place. It was the 63rd edition, which is crazy. And they were covering 34,000 square meters. Like, it's huge. I think they brought in 1,200 brands and cafes and restaurants, and I got lost so many times. But it was really interesting to talk to Sophie and hear about how she's evolved the model, made it a little bit more playful, got some really cool bars. Like, they're making trade fairs fun, which is quite rare if you go
only in Copenhagen, right?
CIF have been around for more than 30 years. There was some heritage and we've been building on. I think the Nordic brands have been super strong in getting a lot of press. They have been in the forefront of more circular fashion, doing a lot there. But then I think what is really important is also the infrastructure of Copenhagen. It's really convenient for the buyers and press to be here. It's a very relaxed atmosphere, the culture. So I think it's a combination of many things. Also the food scene. It's very unique that, commercially speaking, that we are able to have all of the brands under one roof. So the feedback, for instance, for the buyers is that they have more time here to explore new brands. It's actually a nice experience instead of having it like really hectic, as in Paris, for instance, which is, of course, the biggest hub, but here it's just scattered all over the city. We're looking for different brands in each category, each segment. Luckily, it's not only me doing it, but there's a big team. So, of course, every time there's a fashion week or other trade firms, they go around and really try and explore. And then it's, of course, important for us that the brands that are coming here, that there are some like-minded and we're not just finding 20 more of the same. And we also evaluate, like with the brands each season, if it makes sense that they're here, what is the feedback from the buyers. So we make sure it's constantly relevant and it's brands that are also prepared actually to be here and to do business. We group brands together that have similar retailers, so it's more convenient for them. The first section is innovators, so some of the emerging talents, some of them you also see on the show scene, Stam, Helsted, etc. Then the curation, so you also get inspired immediately. But then we try and have more premium fashion together. Of course, within the women's, we have more classic together, we have plus size together, which is also a growing segment with us. We try and have more like-minded, more contemporary women's wear together. And what we really try to do is mix the different countries. Of course, there are the traffic drivers, but then with a bit of newness in between. But we really try and group it as if you were walking into a department store. I think it's important to constantly, evolve and have that inspiration. So it's not only 1,200 brands on a rack and a logo. Someone said this phrase, and I thought it was quite funny, but also very much matching what we're doing. Is the Coachella of fashion. It needs to be a fun experience. You need to feel inspired.
Sophie Dova, director at Copenhagen International Fashion Fair. Grace, we've spoken about the catwalks, how much we love Copenhagen as a city, CIF, and the importance of trade fairs during the week. But I think we need to speak about the people on the streets, the people attending the shows, because I know that was another thing that created a lot of momentum around Copenhagen Fashion Week as an event and gave it much more global attention. What were people wearing this season? Anything interesting? Any interesting attendees?
They were wearing amazing outfits. I'm not going to lie, the street style was more interesting than what you could see on the catwalk.
It's often the case.
I saw a lot of dresses and skirts over jeans, that old 2000s trend that no one wanted to come back, but somehow they make it look amazing. I don't know how they do it. A lot of slicked back buns still, a lot of foulard or handkerchiefs over the hair, kitten heels not going anywhere either. It's very influencer heavy. I spoke to a PR who told me that the ratio in Copenhagen is about 50-50 influencers versus everyone else. Whereas in London, it's more like a quarter of influencers and everyone,
so dynamics
press.
are shifting around that fashion week.
Phones are out all the time. There are so many photographers. There's a bigger show, like literally in the front row.
How do you feel as an editor attending an event where there's so much focus on the influencer side, on social media, on kind of documenting everything on your phone?
It does make me a little bit sad, but I understand. I find it hard not to cringe when I see someone getting their photo taken for like 10 minutes. It can be painful, but I also understand that it's their job.
It's part of the game, but I agree with you. And having been many times myself, I always found it a little bit cringeworthy seeing people change on the streets or holding up the show for half an hour because they were taking pictures outside. But we have to accept that it is part of the game. It has helped in some ways to bring international attention to a much smaller fashion week. But where do we go from here? There is a point of saturation, and I do hope that, I'm not saying that it should go away, but it might need to evolve. We might need to have more long-form conversations and a little bit more substance, I think, so that the attention can go to the brands. And I think another point is what you said in your column after you came back from Copenhagen, that we also need that touch of fantasy to balance out the commercial element of it all. Thank you so much, Grace, for joining me in the studio.
Welcome to the land of wine, cuisine, fashion, and the art of joie de vivre. France, the Monocle Handbook, is the third installment in our series of hardback guides for the best things to do, see and discover in all corners of l'Hexagone. Over 220 plus pages, Monocle's latest book showcases the crème de la crème of the country from the Atlantic to the Alps and the windswept Normandy to the sun-kissed Riviera. Plus, top tables in Paris, Nantes not-to-miss hotels, and where to splash out in Marseille, and plenty more to try from piste to plage. If you're looking to stay longer or put down roots, the book also spotlights the neighbourhoods to know and introduce you to the plucky entrepreneurs who have already made the move. France, the Monocle Handbook is out now. Buy your copy today at monocle.com/books.
It's summertime. It's the summer series. Monocle Designs Summer Essentials.
Welcome back. It's the next instalment of Monocle on Design's summer series, in which our regulars take to the waves to share their design essentials for the season. I'm taking the reins, as Nick, you're actually in, I guess, the guest seat. So
I am, and I love it.
So what staple are you bringing to the table when it comes to celebrating the summertime?
I'm Australian, and it has to be the barbecue. There's no other thing that says summer like a barbecue. I mean, I think what I like is it's a... I guess you could call it an element of outdoor furniture. It's half appliance, half furniture, but it's something that actually connects you with the seasons. And I think that's really, really nice. And kind of, if we're talking summer essentials, that is essential. You need to be able to make the most of the warm weather and be outside.
Tell me, do you have a specific model, a certain aesthetic?
When I think back to my childhood and barbecues, my dad used to kind of get these like monstrosities from Bunnings, which is like a B&Q or a Home Depot sort of thing. They'd be like 2.5 metres long and they could do everything. It was essentially bringing the kitchen outdoors. Look, I appreciate that, but it's not quite... That's not the experience I'm looking for. I want something that doesn't feel like I'm just trying to replicate inside outside. I want something like a Weber barbecue, that sort of American classic, the spherical form of that. It feels a little bit nostalgic. It's something that you could open up, potentially start a like little bonfire in if you wanted to switch from barbecuing to maybe toasting some marshmallows late in the evening. So I kind of like that one. But my real favourite right now, and I'm partly saying this just because I want to put it on my wish list if anyone wants to send it to me, the Etimo grill, which was designed by Milanese creative Gordon Guillemet, for the Italian outdoor furniture company Essimo. These guys are exceptional at creating outdoor furniture, but this is their first time moving into this appliance territory. So it's part of their Fill Outdoor Kitchen series, which, as I kind of said at the top, I don't want something that's replicating the indoor kitchen outdoors. I don't want a bench top. I want an item. And they're these sort of cylindrical barrel-like, I guess, appliances with, there's a few different options. There's the sink, an induction top, and a grill. And the grill is the one that is speaking to me the most. And what I like is that these kind of barrel-like forms are on wheels, so you can roll them out into the garden, you can roll them back into the patio, you can kind of move and play with it. And it kind of gives you that moment of feeling like you're cooking on a campfire, underneath a gorgeous summer sky. There's sort of like an olive greeny one and then a simple black finish, which I think is quite nice. Me personally, I'm always one to go when it comes to cooking and those sorts of things outside. I think the black is nice because it kind of hides those grill marks or a little bit of a scuff or something like that. The form works in either the green or the black.
Excellent. I expect an invite to the next barbecue then.
Okay, I'll see you on my terrace. That sounds good. Sounds like a deal.
It's the summer series. Monocle Designs Summer Essentials. Design Essentials.
Does your city make the cut? Monocle's quality of life focused July-August issue is on newsstands and thudding through subscribers' letterboxes now. Inside this handsome new edition, you'll learn what makes the top cities to call home, see Munich's masterful Olympic legacy, and understand what Kamakura, Fremantle or Naples get right when it comes to living better. Plus the cities tackling their trash, a manifesto for redrafting the urban social contract, and a night out to remember in Tallinn. The bumper July-August double issue of Monocle is out now. Subscribe today so you never miss an issue at monocle.com/subscribe.
Finally on today's show, we focus on the backbone of any good book, the spine. It's the subject of an exhibition called Spinorama at the London Centre for Book Arts. Let's hear now from one of the exhibition's co-curators, graphic designer Fraser Muggeridge. He shares some of the graphic design tropes of the trade and tells us why we should spend a bit more time considering this core element of every book.
A lot of book descriptions come from the human body. The header, the footer, the spine of the body being the kind of backbone of your body, the spine of a book holding it together. When you really think about it, every book has a spine and every book goes on a bookshelf, and you often recognise your book or a book by its spine. We've got a lot of books on book design, and there might be the odd page, the odd mention. Chickle talks about it a lot of how the spine should be and shouldn't be, but really there's not been a kind of dedicated drill down into this really in the history of book design. A spine is quite a hard thing to design because it's usually quite long and thin, so it's a bit of a kind of afterthought. It's often thought of as an undercarriage of a car or something, or the exhaust, but to me, obviously, it's one of the first things you see on your bookshelf or in many bookstores, and it gives the designer a bit of an opportunity to either link the front cover with the back cover, or, as often the case in the show, have a bit of a kind of joke or to subvert the content or do something a bit differently. So I think they're misrepresented spines. They're often a bit of a kind of the last thing you do as a designer. You get the spine width from the printer, and then you it's just got to have a publisher's logo, an author and a book cover, and that can only be done in so many ways. That's true of maybe 90% of books that I design. Sometimes there aren't opportunities to be creative within the spine world, but I suppose the show is looking at that as a kind of concept and thinking about books that are doing something a bit different. There are books that have fake spines on, so there's a fake exposed spine, a spine that is like two spines that is only one spine, or a fake ring-bound spine that's actually a bind. So I suppose it's the designer playing games with the reader. Walter Benjamin's book, The Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction, Penguin Classics book, designed by David Pearson, and the spine is a relatively normal spine. However, the spine gets repeated 20 times on the front cover. So the spine design becomes the cover design. And that happens again in Muriel Cooper as American graphic designer for a book that she designed with Bauhaus, that the spine design is the same as the cover design. So that's a kind of maybe a conceptual view. For example, the graphic design magazine ... had an issue, I think it was 9, where on the spine is the budget that you need to make a magazine. Underneath that is all the money that is owed by bookshops that owe them money for selling their magazine, as a kind of show and tell of the publishing industry. That's a very political spine. There's a couple of spines from the 19th century. Spines obviously fall off over time. We've got a couple of books in the show that the spines have fallen off, but when a spine was made in the 19th century, they used waste paper to prepare the boards for the spine to go on. And of course that could be quite random and quite kind of arbitrary material, but then that now becomes the spine, so that's visible. And the sort of, I suppose it's the sort of undergarment of a spine is visible. Series designs on spines can be really interesting because, of course, you can build up an image or a typographic composition or an idea through a collection of 20 or 30. Of course, one of the most famous examples of that is the Mr. Men books. So the Mr. Men books, if you collect all of them, put them all on a shelf, it spells out my Mr. Men library, which is really nice. So of course, you have this image, and what it really is doing is it's encouraging the reader to collect more. Oh, I haven't got that particular one. You fill in the gap. So it can be used as a kind of marketing ploy, especially in series design. There are other examples of people putting different content on the spine. So you could argue that the front cover is going to sell the book and the spine can have just the barcode, or it can have the colophon, which is the publishing information, or it can have a poem. There's many examples of sort of designers putting other stuff on the spine in a way, probably just to poke fun at the idea that it's a spine. There's a whole category of patterns on spine, cropping a picture on a spine that is cropped in the middle. It doesn't make much sense. And then when you open it out on the front and back, it does make much sense. So it's a kind of picture crop, fake binding spines, which are basically like fake open spines. So an open spine is when there isn't necessarily a cover, so you can see the threads and you can see the binding. It's quite fashionable now, it has been for the last few years. But of course, sometimes people can't either afford to do that or don't want to do it, so they sort of do a picture of it, so it becomes a kind of fake version of it, and there's good and bad ones of that. There's a couple of ones where the spine is actually completely blank, but the printing to what would have been the spine is on the foredge of the book. So you see a lot of that now, where you're printing on the other side of the book. Someone's taken the spine, stole it from the spine and printed it on the foredge of the book. As a kind of joke, really, because obviously it's incredibly expensive to do. It's something that we're hoping, we have kind of obviously ambitions to make a publication, a book of spines. I don't know what the spine would be like on the book of spines. To create a spine archive of these books with interesting spines, and really I suppose to get the younger generation of students or people or publishers to think about the spine as an integral part of a book. Really, that's our ambition. But I do feel that in contemporary graphic design it really is very much very standardized. I've been party to that, and often there isn't much you can do. Sometimes you don't need to make those moves, these kind of big bold design moves on the spine, but sometimes there is an opportunity where you can.
The graphic designer Fraser Muggeridge there. The exhibition Spinorama is on at the London Centre of Book Arts until the 17th of August 2024. And that's all for today's show. For more design stories, listen to our 5-minute midweek bonus show, Monocle on Design Extra, which airs on Thursdays. And if you enjoy print, then do pick up a copy of Monocle magazine as well. It's on all good newsstands now. Today's episode was produced and edited by Maylee Evans, with assistance from Lily Austin and Steph Chungu. I'm Nick Manise, and you can reach me on nm@monocle.com. Thanks for listening.